Hello YouTube, Mr. Mags here. Today, I will be ranking every single group of Pokemon gym leaders to determine which Pokemon region I believe has the best gym leaders. Now, this is kind of a sequel to a previous video where I did something very similar with the Elite Four, and I really enjoyed making that video, so I wanted to come back and do something very similar here with gym leaders. So if you haven't watched that previous video with Elite Four, I highly recommend that. But for right now, let's get right into how I will be ranking these gym leaders. So, first, only the gym leader aces will be judged. As discussed in actually several different previous videos, I genuinely believe there are many gym leader teams that are actively terrible. There's a lot of repeat. The Pokemon are just underwhelming. They don't really seem to represent the region very well, that kind of thing. But for the purposes of this video, I will only be ranking the aces of every single gym leader. Only initial battle teams will be judged. There's many times when you can fight a gym leader in a different context from them being a gym leader, or there's a rematch team or some kind of post-game team where they have a different ace. I'll only be talking about them insofar as it being the first time you can fight them as a gym leader in any given Pokemon game. And I'll be talking about every instance of a new group of aces. So, on top of only initial battle teams, if there is like a third version or some kind of remake or some other way where there's a group of eight new aces, that'll be a group that I'll rank. The only exception to this will be the Kanto gym leaders from the Johto games. Since those are all post-game fights, and I just didn't really feel confident about exactly how to rank those, since you can fight them in any order. Kanto will also have several other positions on this list since they've just been around the longest. I just didn't really want to put them in the same kind of category as the rest of these gym leaders since they are a post game, and I just didn't really feel like doing that. So outside of those, every single group of aces will be judged. The primary factor is judged the strength relative to position. So if and this will kind of be weighted very differently depending on if it's first or last. So if the first or second gym leader ace isn't the best, I'm not really gonna weigh that as much against the group. But if I believe the seventh or eighth uh, ace is underwhelming and kind of bad, then that'll definitely be a bigger deal to me. So that'll kind of be like case by case basis, but just generally, I like it when the strength of the ace kind of ramps up as you go. Iconography, a lot of these gym leader aces are very memorable, very iconic. Just when you think of the region, you think of these specific aces first. So just, the iconography of the specific Pokemon will definitely help a region as a whole rank up. And then just any kind of X factor. If anything, like if that Pokemon is used a bunch of other places, or if it just feels like, it should be something else, or if it's just, I don't know, there's a lot of different things that can fall under this X factor that I'll get to on a case by case basis. But I'll get more on those just, later. But those are kind of the three main things that I felt made the most sense to judge these groups on. And lastly is just my personal subjective opinion. Um, as someone who's been playing Pokemon games for a long time, I just have a lot of thoughts about a lot of these trainers, a lot of these Pokemon. So, a lot of your opinions can be very different than mine. I completely respect that. I'd like to have conversations about where you would rank them down below, but this is just my personal ranking of gym leader aces. So, starting off with number 13, and there are 13 unique groups of aces again outside of the Kanto ones from the Johto games. So let's get right into the list here. Now, For some inexplicable reason, in leaf green, fire red only, they gave Giovanni a Rhyhorn. Not a Rhydon, a Rhyhorn. A Rhyhorn that you fought on Giovanni's team several other times throughout the games whenever you fight him. A Rhyhorn that you fight several other times within the gym itself with junior trainers and that kind of thing. Just many other times throughout the region you fight Rhyhorn. It's just crazy to me and something that I genuinely believe has to be a coding error that Giovanni has a Rhyhorn. And for that reason alone, I genuinely think that the Kanto group of aces from Leaf Green, Fire Red goes at the very bottom of my tier list. Now, for the record, I also think that the rest of these Pokemon here are good enough to be a lot higher. If this Rhyhorn were a Rhydon, it'd be so much higher. If Kanto didn't appear later in the list, I would heavily consider bumping this up quite a bit. Also, I put Victory Bell here instead of Vileplume, just since Vileplume will show up later, I wanted to just kind of showcase the fact that Vileplume and Victory Bell on Erica's team are both kind of considered her aces since they're both the same level. But yeah, Onyx, Starmie, Raichu, Victory Bell, Weezing, Alakazam, Arcanine. That is a very good ranking, like ramping of strength. And technically, Weezing and Alakazam can be fought in any order, but just for the purposes of showing that they are, ramping up in strength, I think this makes the most sense. And I think Rhydon is at least, like vibe wise, at least as good as Alakazam and Arcanine. So that would have been a perfect ramping. But then you have Rhyhorn just bringing down the entire region, I believe, so much that this is last. And again, if Kanto didn't show up later on, I would heavily consider putting this up way higher. But just since this is my ranking and I have always been perplexed and annoyed at that Rhyhorn, I'm putting this last. All right, number 12. The Unova Black 2 and White 2 group of aces. That being Lillipup, Whirlipede, Leavanny, Zebstrika, Excadrill, Swanna, Haxorus, and Jellicent. Now, I've been on record saying before that Sharon's Sharon's team, his gym leader team from Black and White 2, is one of my least favorite teams of all time. A Patrat and Lillipup is not worthy of a gym leader, especially since you literally fight a junior trainer in his gym with a Lillipup. One has a Patrat, one has a Lillipup, then you fight him with a Patrat and Lillipup. So you literally already fight another trainer with his ace, so it's not even his ace anymore. On top of Lillipup just not being ace potential like material at all. I feel like Minchino would be at least a little better, at least be more unique. But no, it's a Lillipup. And I feel like Whirlipede isn't like that much better. I don't know. Just I the first two, the first two that they changed, I personally feel like didn't really justify the change. And then the next chunk of gym leaders, I think, are actually pretty good to the point where Black and White are going to show up a lot later on this list. Leaving Zebstrika, Excadrill, Swanna, Hexorus. That's a decent ramping. I think you should probably switch Swanna and Excadrill if you were to, you know, I think that would make for a better ramp up in strength. But overall, that's pretty good. And then Jellicent being after Haxorus, I've never liked that at all. Marlon's team, in its entirety has always felt a little underwhelming. But at least I feel like Caracasa and Waylord on his team are are somewhat imposing, and then Jellison being the ace, I really feel like that just kind of brings down the entire group. If Jellison were where Swanna or Excadrill is, and they bump them both up with Haxorus still last, I think that'd be pretty cool. If Jellison were even like a Darmanitan or some other, you know, actually pretty strong and pretty imposing uh Gen 5 Pokemon, I think that could also work. Like even like Archeops, or if it were a Caracosta. But Jellicent just never screamed ace material to me, especially as an eighth gem. So yeah, this kind of goes on like both extremes of how I'm gonna be ranking these. I know I said that the early gems don't aren't gonna have as much of an impact overall, but if it's as egregious as Lillipup, that's not good. Like that, definitely not the iconicness that I like gym leaders to have. And the Jellicent being this underwhelming eighth gym leader is definitely bringing down the group. Next up, number 11, Kalos. Now, I've always been a little harsh on Kalos as a whole, and I genuinely do think it's kind of for good reason. Like, Vivian is a fine enough first ace. Tyrant, again, I actually kind of like how Tyrant and Auroras are on the or Amora, yeah, Amora are on the same level. So either of them could go here. I feel like the Tyrant, since it goes last, I feel like it's more of Grant's ace. And then I just feel like it doesn't really go anywhere. Like after Halucha, who's next, I feel like it doesn't really ramp up. If anything, it either plateaus or goes down a little. Halucha, Go-Go, and Heliolisk, they're all like around the same tier. Sylveon might be a little higher, although I genuinely have to always constantly remind myself that Sylveon is the ace of Valerie and not Florges. I just feel like Florges makes more sense. It'll be more iconic to me. I feel like Sylveon just would work better like on a rival team or somewhere else. Um, it's a fine enough ace, like it, by nature of it being an evolution, it is fairly powerful. I just, for some reason in my head, just can never remember that it is actually the ace of a gym leader. And then Meowstick has always been extremely underwhelming to the point where I, in my head, always get Meowstick and Sylveon switched in their position. I always think that Meowstick is sixth and Sylveon is seventh because Meowstick makes zero sense as the ace of a seventh gym, especially when your main rival in that region also uses Meowstick just as one of their Pokemon. So by the time you get to the ace of a psychic gym, it's just a Meowstick. You fought that thing, many times before, and it's just kind of mundane and underwhelming at that point. And then Avalugg, I feel, is on a very similar tier as Go-Go and Sylveon. Is just not a very imposing and memorable final ace. Like the overall group isn't terrible. It's just definitely not what I personally am looking for in a great Pokemon League. So yeah, that's why it's this low, just barely out of the top 10. Here you go with number 10, Paldea. Now, this one was really tricky to rank here because just as a general rule, I typically like it when a group of gym leaders have Pokemon that are unique to their region. However, by the very, nature of the terrestrializing gimmick, I completely understand why they did it this way, why they would have, you know, Pokemon not of their region, not of their type, Terra into their type specialty. It allows a lot of Pokemon, from previous regions to get more spotlight, to be used in ways that they've never been used before. And I, to an extent, kind of like that, especially in situations like with Teddiursa and Sudowoodo, you know, both having elements that I think lend themselves well to being bug and especially grass. I really like Miss Magius having levitate, so when it tears into an electric type, it functionally has no weaknesses. Her Abominable is fun to turn into a water type. Star Raptor is fun since it's already a normal type and also kind of foreshadows um his the fact that he is also the Flying Elite Four member. But then the last three I don't quite understand as much. Toxtricity, I absolutely adore Toxtricity, but I don't I it does fit Rhyme very well as this rapper character, so it makes sense that she would have a a Pokemon that is more music focused, but it is convenient that it learns a Hex. But that's I feel like if it didn't know Hex, I don't really know what they would have done. Florges is another one that I feel does fit the character well with Tulip, uh, you know, being this beauty enthusiast who has a Gardevoir who's also a fairy type. So like fairy and psychic have always been kind of aesthetically linked. So I kind of understand what they're going for with making Florges psychic or yeah, psychic. And then Altaria, I genuinely don't even know what they're going for. Is it because Altaria is blue? It can learn Ice Beam, I guess, but a lot of Pokemon can learn Ice Beam. I feel like there are several other Pokemon that would work better, not only just, strength wise as an eighth gym, but just aesthetic wise would work better as a Pokemon that isn't ice, could look or make sense to be ice type. I don't know what it is about the eighth gym leaders being ice types and having kind of underwhelming Pokemon. That's twice now back to back that I don't really understand Altaria. And if Miss Magius weren't also here, I might be like a little more lenient about the fact that Altaria was a previous gym leader's ace, because at least all the others, um, outside of Miss Magius, weren't already like gym leader aces. But even though I like Miss Magius, I've always also been a little rubbed the wrong way about her being Fantina's ace. And then you also have Altaria, who was previously known as ace. I know both of those games happened a long time ago, and over time a lot of Pokemon have been used on as various aces, but I feel like with how many Pokemon are in the Paldea Pokedex, surely there is someone else I personally think could have worked better as a previous gen Pokemon that terrestrializes it into an ice type. If anyone has any ideas or disagrees completely, I completely understand. Um, But yeah, on top of just the fact that I do kind of feel like it would have been better if they had just used Pokemon from Paldea and had them Terra into their own type, like Cetitan. That is an eighth gym Pokemon, but I just never really liked the fact that you beat Cetitan, which should be his ace, and then he sends out Altaria, and I've just always found that a little underwhelming. Number nine, Johto. This was another one that was incredibly hard to rank because I've historically said that I really do not like most of these gym leaders. For starters, um, if I'm not mistaken, I think all the Johto Pokemon that you see on screen here are all of the Johto Pokemon that are in the entire gym leader challenge. Like Clefairy is the only like kind of exception since it technically evolves from Cleffa, who is a Gen 2 Pokemon. But every single other Pokemon on these gym leader teams, are Kanto Pokemon. On top of the fact that, one, two, three, four of these are already themselves Kanto Pokemon. So there's literally only four Johto Pokemon throughout the entire Johto League. So my initial thought was, you know, to kind of put that against them a little more and rank it higher. But then I looked at I decided to stay true to my rule set and not judge them based on the team, just the group of aces. this is going to be another instance where Pidgeotto being the first ace is still gonna go against it quite a bit. I never understood why Pidgeotto is the ace. That just there's a lot of other flying types in the region. Pidgeotto itself just isn't it's a little better in the Heart Gold Soul Silver where it's a little higher level and Roost can kind of mess you up a little bit, but in Gold and Silver at level 9, that's unacceptable. I really don't know why they thought that was a good idea. But at least Scyther evolves into Scizor, which is a Gen 2 Pokemon. And then Miltank. This one was also making it specifically tricky where to rank it because even though I think a lot of the other Pokemon on this in this group, even the Gen 2 Pokemon, are slightly underwhelming, Miltank specifically is one of the most iconic gym leader aces of all time. Like it's kind of a universal fact in the Pokemon community that that Whitney's Miltank is one of the strongest and, you know, just most ridiculous Pokemon to fight in any Pokemon game. And they made it even worse in Heart Gold Soul Silver when they gave it this crappy ability to hit any ghost types you're hoping to wall it with, on top of a Lum Berry, so you can't even try to burn or paralyze it. You gotta, you know, do that multiple times and hope you're not fainted before you can actually cripple it. So, like that alone, the fact that it's this iconic of a Pokemon, I think kind of leveled it out a little bit to being where I put it. Um, then the rest of them here, Gengar, Poliwrath, they're both Gen 1 Pokemon that there's a very, I think, obvious Gen 2 Pokemon that should have gone there. But then the last three actually being Gen 2 Pokemon does also save it a little bit. We have Steelix, Piloswine, Kingdra. Now, for the record, technically speaking, you can fight Poliwrath, Steelix, or Piloswine in any order. But as far as the badges are concerned, Piloswine is the last, even though I do genuinely think that Steelix makes more sense as just story wise and also level wise and also just vibe wise. Steelix makes more sense as a seventh gem. Steelix is technically the sixth. But yeah, at least the last three are actually both Gen 2 Pokemon and are actually fairly challenging, especially that last Kingdra. So Kingdra being as good as it is, with that Dragon Water typing, being actually a Gen 2 Pokemon and being really fast, really strong, really bulky is hard to take down, especially in actually there isn't a game that this Kingdra existed in where Fairy exists at all. So it's just a very, very good last ace of a Pokemon. So yeah, this one was a little hard to rank, but I do think overall I'm satisfied with my ranking here. Next up, number 8, the Hoenn Emerald group. Now, I had to set aside my personal biases so hard with the Hoenn ones because Sapphire was my first ever Pokemon game that I played, so I adore, pretty much every single one of these Pokemon here. Obviously this is the Emerald team, but just to kind of set the stage, I genuinely think that uh even in Emerald, but especially Ruby and Sapphire, just the ramping of each of these Pokemon, it works very well, but also I think each of these Pokemon work very well as a final boss in the position that they are. Nosepass is deceptively very bulky. It can't hit very hard, but it hits hard enough where the stuff that you have access to it, even the stuff that is good against rock, will only last, a couple of hits before you have to do something about it. Makuhita, even though it's not fully evolved, it's still, again, pretty deceptively bulky. It just has a lot of utility about it that can make it hit very hard. In Emerald, we have Magnetric instead of Magneton. We'll get to in just a second. But Magnetric is very fast, hits very hard with Shockwave, and I think that is just a very, good spot for Magnetric. Same with Torkoal. Torkoal is on paper kind of underwhelming Pokemon. If it were any higher up, I don't think it would be nearly as imposing as it is. But it being as tanky as it is, since you can't do anything to lower its stats with its white smoke ability. Overheat is an incredibly powerful move along with that white herb. That way you can use it twice with no consequences. That I think is always a pretty solid roadblock for any Hoenn playthrough, especially if you don't really, plan around it. Slacking, exact same thing, but to the point where, you know, I maybe slacking should have gone higher up. I do kind of like how it kind of signifies like the end of the early game, and then you go past that, and the rest of the gyms are still pretty strong. But that slacking is a it's like a rite of passage. Like once you beat the slacking, you know that you're ready to take on the rest of the game. Because Altaria is also no slouch. Sure, it's weak, it's quad weak to ice, but unless you go to the game corner and or maybe you can get the ice beam for the abandoned ship, but unless you go out of your way to get the ice beam TM, the only other, I believe, in Emerald, the only other ice move you have available, period, is Powder Snow from Cast Form. So yeah, not the best move. I guess Weather Ball a couple levels higher at 30. You can do Weather Ball Hail with that, but still you have to rely on Cast Form, who is not a very good Pokemon. And then Lunatone and Solrock in Ruby and Sapphire specifically, they are actually or Ruby Sapphire and Emerald are actually a very imposing, uh, very imposing pair. Um, just the way moves and stats worked back then, like there weren't that many powerful grass or steel or dark moves that could hit them in ways that they can't just get around with Calm Mind and their move sets. I feel are very well crafted to fighting things that are good against them. So I think those are a very good pairing, especially the fact that it's a double battle also makes that harder. But then I feel like all of that up to this point has been very, very good to the point where I actually had Hoenn Emerald specifically a lot higher on this list until I kind of, thought about it a little more. And that Kingdra really annoys me. Not just the fact that Wand's Kingdra is specifically made to irritate you for no reason. This Kingdra, it's for some reason made to be a double team Resto Chesto set with Ice Beam and Surf as coverage moves, which that's a really good set, but why is it no double team? Maybe they're kind of like they're kind of like you know going off the fact that you technically have access to Rayquaza before you can fight this. So if you don't send out Rayquaza immediately, um, it may have set up a couple of double teams. So even though Rayquaza is 26 levels higher than it, yeah, because it's 40, no, 20, yeah, 24 levels higher because it's on 46. Rayquaza is 70 when you catch it. So if you don't send Rayquaza out immediately, then it might have a couple of double teams set up. So then if you do get it out there to have some double teams up, you click outrage, but then it misses, and then it can retaliate with an ice beam, which probably won't one shot, but will do a ton of damage. Then if you can kill the next turn, it will kill you. But then if you are able to whittle it down, if you don't have Rayquaza on your team and you are able to whittle it down with like Toxic or just whittle it down with other moves, it can then use Rest and restore back with that Chesto Berry, and then you have to start all over. So on top of it just being a super annoying fight, I don't really understand why they decided to give Juan a Kingdra when you literally just fought a Kingdra in the last generation, last gym leader. I don't really understand that. So that alone does kind of knock it down a few pegs, I think. I originally had it, I think, up 2 slots, but then I do feel good about knocking it down just for that Kingdra alone. I will say though that I think since they switched out from Ruby and Sapphire, since they switched out Magneton and Milotic for Manectric and Kingdra, I do some a part of me does kind of wish they had played around a little more with switching up some gym leaders here and there, but because I like the rest of these gym leaders so much, I'm not, opposed to what they did. I am, however, opposed to them switching out with Kingdra, especially since there are a ton of other water types that could have pulled from. So, so yeah, hope that all made sense. I don't think it's bad enough to go at much lower, depending on how you look, to like, be like out of the top 10 or anything, but still, it's egregious enough to have that Kingdra last. You have stuff like Wailord and other water types in the region that I think Kingdra being last makes this not the best overall group. Number 7, the other Hoenn group, and I specifically said Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. It's the same group as Ruby and Sapphire. I do technically think that the Ruby and Sapphire group is kind of, in a way, even though it's the exact same Pokemon, they are stronger overall than Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, just because the amount of moves you have available are way fewer in Ruby and Sapphire. The moves you do have, a lot of them got buffed in later generations. You have access to just a lot of, better abilities, better moves in general. Just a lot of Pokemon have increased move sets. A lot of, some Pokemon up to that point actually got buffed in certain ways. I just feel like, and actually in ORAS, some of these Pokemon had the levels brought down a little, I guess, to make it easier, even though you didn't need to. But regardless, just looking at the group itself, the only blemish here is Magneton. If it were the exact same group, Nosepass, Makuhita, Manectric, Torkoal, Slacking, Altaria, Lunatone, Solrock, Milotic, that would be top 3 potential easily. No hesitation. I would put that top 3. But because of that Magneton, because it is not a Gen 3 Pokemon, it has to be out of the top 5 at least. I have never liked that Magneton at all. I've gone on record saying that Watson has one of my least favorite teams of all time just because of that Magneton. On top of not having a single Gen 3 Pokemon on the rest of his team, but even just in this group alone, I don't understand why they gave Magneton. And the argument could be made, oh, it's because Manectric actually evolves at a couple levels higher than this team's level cap. But no, that can't be why, because Magneton actually evolves at an even higher level. I'm pretty sure Manectric evolves at 26. Magneton evolves at 30. And you can't even argue that even more because they gave him Magnetric at level 24 in Emerald. So that's not an argument. I will say that Magneton specifically is actually a pretty imposing threat at that point. It has incredibly high defense, really high special attack. It's fast enough for it'll outspeed some things at that point in the game. But even if it doesn't outspeed, it can still confuse, it can still paralyze. Like there's a lot going for this Magneton, with it actually being pretty good. However, just the fact that it is a Magneton, I I really don't like it. And again, if it were Magnetric instead of Magneton, it's kind of like a fusion of both. It would be a lot higher. It was something I was really hoping they would fix in Omega Ruby FS Sapphire, and they just didn't. So there you go, number 7. Number 6, Galar. This is actually a really like fun group. Um, a part of me does really hate the Machamp, Gengar, and Lapras here, especially since there were actually a couple of like a good number of Pokemon that are in the Galar Pokedex that could easily make sense as an ace for fighting a ghost and an ice gym leader. They don't have Gigantamax forms, but you could have given them Gigantamax forms. But outside of those three, Eldegoss, Dreadnought, and then you have the Gigantamax Pokemon for the rest of the time outside of Obstagoon. We'll get there. Centiskorch, like I said, Machamp Gengar, Alcremie, Colossal, Lapras, Obstagoon, and Duraludon. That's actually, I think, a pretty decent ramping of strength. Um, each of them are just have really cool designs. They're, because they are so big, they are, they are memorable. They are imposing. A part of me kind of wishes that Dreadnought also Gigantamaxed. I understand the idea of, oh, you have two, and then, like kind of you fight the fire guy as kind of like as a it's in the lore that the fighting guy is kind of like specifically made to be a roadblock for trainers to the point where it was like over half or like 80. It was like a pretty high amount of trainers who get to him just end up failing the gym challenge completely. So I kind of understand why they didn't have Dreadnought Gigantamax, but at least they have you fight Nessa later where she can Gigantamax her Dreadnought. But and it would have been cool to see G-Max Dreadnought even that early on. But like, even with it just being a regular Dreadnought, still a pretty solid Pokemon, especially since it can set up the rain with a Max Geyser and then also has some good coverage moves. Like it's a pretty good Pokemon. Um, but yeah, it's another one of those where I genuinely think if they just switched out the Pokemon not of their region for Pokemon of their region, this may even be top three potential. Like I even really like the flavor of Obstagoon not Gigantamaxing. Like you deal with all these Pokemon who have Gigantamax, and you get to the seventh one is like, I don't really feel like Gigantamaxing. It's not really my thing. We're just gonna have a regular battle, and that's also a lot of fun. And then Duraludon, on top of it, just being a good Pokemon, is also in a double battle format, which could it is just by nature trickier to take down. So, yeah, I really enjoy this group. I do think, as you'll see, it's just not quite good enough to make it into the top five. Um, if even just one of those three Gen 1 Pokemon were pushed out with the Gen 8 Pokemon, it maybe could get a little higher. That is my only gripe with it. But as it stands right now, just barely out of the top five. Now we're into the top five. At number five, we have the Unova Black and White. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but because a couple of them were changed in Black and White too, I almost kind of wish that even more were changed. But regardless, Black and White actually, I think, has a really solid ramping of gym leaders. So you have the Elemental Monkey that's strong against the star you picked, Watchog, who I've never really felt to be the most memorable and most challenging ace. Like it's fast enough and strong enough where its first retaliation will be pretty devastating to something that can't resist it. It has hypnosis, which can also be kind of tricky to work around. So in the battle itself, it's fine. I just never really seen it as like that iconic to Lenora as an ace Pokemon. But then from there, Leavanny, Zebstrika, Excadrill, Swanna, Beartic, Haxorus. That is a very nice ramping of strength. Again, I think Excadrill and Swanna should probably switch in order to actually, I think have an even cleaner ramp up. But this is a very solid group of Pokemon. I think Watchog is and kind of Swanna are the only real blemishes. If Swanna were a Braviary, this could even be even higher. But as it is right now, a very solid group. And if you're gonna change, what three of them, you might as well change, over half of them, or just reorder them a little bit. Have Clay go. Might be a little like difficult to do for the story, but like Maybe have Excadrill go even later just to show that yeah, Excadrill is so good and Clay is so well respected in the league that he's able to move up in the ordering. Um, Haxorus being demoted to seventh never made sense to me, especially if it's replaced with Jellicent. Um, so yeah, they should have done even more reworking of these aces, but not to necessarily want them to change the aces, since I do overall like this group quite a bit. Now, number four. This is the second entry for Kanto, and that is the yellow version of the Kanto Pokemon League. We have we have Onyx, Starmie, Raichu, so no changes there. Gloom instead of Vileplume or Victory Bell. In this case, actually, Gloom and Weeping Bell are the same level, but I went with Gloom here since that goes last. We have Venomoth instead of Wheezing, which I think is technically a downgrade. I do really wish in yellow they had stamped down you had to fight him first before Alakazam, because Alakazam and Venomoth are both in level 50, so you still kind of can choose which order you go in, but Alakazam is absolutely more of a, definitely a higher ranking than Venomoth, but just for the purposes of this video and also just by um gym badge order of how they go in your bag, uh, Venomoth and Alakazam, Arcanine, and then technically speaking, in yellow, Giovanni has kind of two aces. Both his Rhydon, which he actually has a Rhydon now. Don't know why they changed it in Leafy and Fire Red, but he has a Rhydon, and his Nidoking are both on level 55. I honestly kind of feel like it should have been his Nidoqueen at 55, even though I like Nidoking more. It's one of my favorite Pokemon of all time. Nidoqueen was on his team in the Silph fight, and he had a Nidorino. So I feel it would have been a natural progression to have Nidoqueen be his like kind of secondary ace since he's had that Nidoqueen for longer. But regardless, I really like Nidoking. Um, maybe you should have had all three, but regardless, Nidoking and Rhydon both have very similar vibes, so I went with Nidoking here instead. I don't think the ranking would have changed one way or the other, so I went with Nidoking. But yeah, this is a very, very solid group of Pokemon. If Gloom were still a Vileplume, I think this would go even higher. But as it stands now, Gloom is kind of the only depression when with that ramping of strength. But yeah, and Venomoth to an extent as well. It being level 50 does help it kind of feel more imposing. But yeah, I think this is an overall just a very solid group of aces. Now, top three, we have the Sinnoh, and it's the Diamond and Pearl or Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl group of aces with Cranidos, Roserade, Lucario, Floatzel, Mismagius, Bastiodon, Abomasnow, Luxray. Now, on paper, as you'll see in just a second, because I like the Platinum one a lot more, I honestly thought initially that this group would be, a little higher up or lower, would be like, number five or six, somewhere around there. But putting them all together on a list like this, I think this is actually a very, very solid group of aces. Um, Luxray to an extent could be seen as a little underwhelming since the player has had access to Luxray since Route 1, where you can find a Shinx on, not Route 1, but super early on in the game you can find Shinx, so you've probably had a Luxray for the vast majority of the game. But it is actually deceptively strong. It has over 520 base, I think like 523 or something really high like that. So not only can it hit hard with its crunches and sparks, which Thunderfang, I guess, um, it also can make pretty good use of the unique TM charge beam to then, because it actually still has pretty good special attack. And I do think it is on a tier higher than the previous two two aces, Daciodon and Abomasnow. Um, so yeah, I think this is just a very nice ramping. Lucario and Floatzel could technically be fine in either order, but like I've done before, as far as like where they're putting the badge, in the badge case, it would usually goes fighting water. But regardless, I don't think I think both of them are kind of equally strong. And then Miss Mackey, Spaceon, Abomasnow, Luxray. That's just a very natural progression of strength. However, once again, I'm not talking about the rest of these teams because, oh boy, Candace's team is terrible. Volkner's team has only two electric types, but as far as just the aces go, this is good. Roserade is a very, very good second. It might even be like the second best second ace outside of Starmie, maybe. I can't think of many other second aces that are that imposing, that fast, that strong, have access to that many unique options like spore moves and with its poison point ability. If you aren't stun spored, if you hit it, you can potentially be poisoned. Just it has a lot going on that I think just makes it a very good Pokemon. Um, but yeah, I like this quite a bit. Not quite as much as my number two, which is the Platinum group. It's kind of funny that I do have them right next to each other, even though Platinum really changed two Pokemon. It changed the order of some of them. It instead of Miss Maggie is fifth and Floatzel and Lucario being third or fourth, depending on what you do, they now go Cranidos, Roserade, Miss Magius, Lucario, Floatzel, Bastiodon, uh, Frostlass, Electivire. It's another instance where I almost kind of wish they had changed even more. Um, I don't like necessarily think they had to, but I don't know, would have been kind of fun to have it be Dust Noir instead of Miss Magius. Maybe Magnezone instead of Bastiodon, but then I really like how Byron's ace is the other fossil as the first one. So they didn't need to do that. It would have been kind of cool if they changed one or two more than just the last two. But those changing those last two, even though I do think Obama Snow and Luxray are actually pretty good, I think Frostlass and Electivire fit the trainer better and also are just more imposing threats. Frostlass doesn't have any dual weaknesses. It has an ability that is enhanced by the snow that the rest of the team puts up. And then Electivire is even stronger, even faster, and I think even bulkier. Yeah, it had to be than Luxray. So the fact that they nailed down the ramping, I do think Floatzel, Lucario, and Miss Magius are all like around the same, level. Um, yeah, I think even though Floatzel is, I think technically a little weaker as far as base set total goes than the other two. It still is incredibly fast. It's still incredibly strong, especially for that point in the game. So I think this is a natural progression of strength. All right, and my number one, I've been doing the math. This seemed kind of obvious, especially with how I've talked about this region in other entries on this video here. That being the Kanto group from the original game, but also specifically Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Like, I didn't want to do this two videos in a row. In my spoilers, if you haven't seen it, but in the Elite Four video, the only reason why Kanto wasn't number one was because I basically cheated by throwing in the Blueberry Academy. Outside of that, I basically was like, yeah, they're actually number one. This other thing is basically cheating. Kanto really is number one. And man, they really did nail it the first time twice, was with the Elite Four and also gym leaders. Onyx, Starmie, Raichu, Vileplume, Weezing, Alakazam, Arcanine, Rhydon. That is a powerhouse of a group of aces. They're all super iconic. They're all just generally very, very strong, imposing, groups of aces for that point in the game. Um, Thinking about it, I think technically speaking, hmm, actually, I'm sorry, I just had a feeling. I actually am not entirely sure if Weezing is Koga's ace in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. There may technically need to be one more if his ace is Venomoth, which I'm now thinking that might be the case in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. So regardless, I think this group, which would be the red and blue one, regardless, this is first. Um, if Weezing is not Koga's ace in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee and is Venomoth, I think it's like right below the other one, if not right, maybe one above. It's still in the top five. So regardless, Kanto, this group of aces, which is in fact in a Kanto playthrough, is absolutely, I believe, without a doubt, the first, the number one best group of aces. Onix, although it is not the strongest Pokemon, is still pretty tanky for that point in the game. It can still hit hard enough, kind of, to, especially with just the kinds of Pokemon you can find up to that point. There's not a lot that can resist it. There's not a lot that can hit it very hard. It is a pretty, for lack of a better term, solid first ace. And then Starmie, thank goodness it doesn't know any psychic moves because having dual stab with like let's say Psybeam and Water Pulse or Bubble Beam, whichever would be devastating. Raichu being as fast as it is, pretty strong. Vileplume, I personally have never really had like the hardest time with Vileplume, but it is still, uh, a third stage Pokemon with a pretty high base stat total, especially for the fourth gem. Wheezing, if it comes out before, if it comes out not last and uses self-destruct, it's probably taking out something on your team. But even then, having smoke screen and other, ways to poison you, that can be annoying, especially since it is bulky enough where you're probably not one-shotting it. Alakazam is obviously always been a beast. It, it alone caused the creation of Dark and Steel as typings existing. So yeah, that is, and a lot of people say that Sabrina is up there in conversation for the strongest gym leader of all time, and I kind of agree. Um, Arcanine, this is technically from Leaf Green Fire Red, but Blaine's Arcanine was actually from memory, Blaine's Arcanine was actually the first ever battle that I definitively lost. Well, technically, it was the first one I tied because when I was fighting him, I don't know how it happens, and I'm pretty sure the first playthrough I used Blastoise, but whatever. Um, I didn't one shot it, and then it used takedown and beat my Pokemon, and then its recoil took it out. But because we both had no Pokemon left, the game decided that I lost, so I didn't get the badge. So yeah, and Arcanine still knows takedown and a lot of other good moves in the original Red and Blue. So yeah, it is a very imposing ace. And then Rhydon, although it is quad weak to both water and grass, it is still just vibe wise a very good final boss for the gym challenge. But yeah, once again, I am kind of now thinking that this shouldn't be Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. It should probably just be red and blue and then have Weezing switch out for Venomoth to be a little higher up. But yeah, I think it's fair for Kanto to be here only three times. So we'll leave it at that. All right. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know down below what you thought about my rankings. Are there any that you think I got completely wrong? Do you just, are there any that you think should be higher or lower? Is there anything that I missed? Is there like a reasoning that you would put someone higher or lower that I missed? Put your rankings if you want down below. I really enjoy having discussions like this. But speaking of which, I Really appreciate everybody that's been watching my more recent videos. My last one is doing incredibly well, especially for the size of my channel. I I appreciate every single new viewer, every new subscriber. Hope y'all continue to watch and continue to enjoy and comment. And I would love to hear recommendations for future videos y'all want to see because I'm not running out of ideas, but I might eventually. So with just how many new people are watching these, I really want to have your feedback with how you think this, what direction you think this channel should go, what future content do you want to see. So yeah, I would really appreciate all that down below. Um, so yeah, with all that, I will see you all next time.